You are listening to the Fertility Talk series hosted by Blessed Brokenness, a 501c3 bringing spiritual healing and financial blessings to those who suffer from infertility and child loss. Blessed Brokenness serves the community through in-person and virtual faith-based small groups and scholarships for fertility treatments and grief counseling. We hope you will subscribe to our channel and learn more about our ministry and how we are helping men and women find hope and healing through God's Word. Thank you for watching Fertility Talks, hosted by Blessed Brokenness. I'm Mallory Ware, co-founder, and hosting with me today is our board chairman, Rodney Miller. Hey, Rodney.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we have an exciting topic today, which we are so just hopeful with this insight that we will bring to you guys and answer some of the questions that you may be wondering yourself. We will be talking about embryo adoption as well as embryo donation. And Rodney and Mary Leah have experienced this firsthand, and they will be able to share their story on a later fertility talk. So make sure and check it out. Without further ado, Rodney, I'd love for you to introduce our speaker today.
Yes, well, thank you all for I guess, settling in and watching this one. I'm very excited. This particular fertility talk has been about a year in the making. And with us today, we have Mark Mellinger. He serves as the Marketing and Development Director for the National Embryo Donation Center, which we will be shortening to the NEDC throughout this podcast. And this is really exciting for me because even as I sit here today, I recall the first time I met Mark. My wife and I were up at the NEDC visiting for the very first time. And Mark walked in and basically introduced himself as the PR guy for the NEDC and told us it is his job to raise awareness about embryo donation and embryo adoption, and wanted to know if there's anything he could do for us and also anything we can do to help him raise awareness. And Mary Lee and I perked up immediately once we heard that, and we knew we both had the same idea. And it was having this particular interview with him through Blessed Brokenness in an effort to help raise awareness for the NEDC with the couples that we serve and minister to. And I'm just extremely excited to do this. We are hoping that this is the first step in many of a long partnership between these two ministries. And so with that, Mark, I will just start by thanking you for joining us and let you know we are extremely excited to have you here, especially now that we know that between these two ministries, the missions just overlap so much.
They really do overlap, and I'm excited about being a part of this too. Thank you so much for welcoming me here. And I do hope at some point to visit you guys. I was listening to a pastor, I believe it was last week, a prominent pastor in your area, Harry Reeder, over at Briarwood Presbyterian Church. And he said, if you've never been to Birmingham, Alabama, you need to come visit, because then when you get to heaven, it won't be such a culture shock. So
I like that, and I agree with that. There are no shortage of churches here in Birmingham, and it's quite the blessing. It's an anointed city, I would say.
Well, I'm looking forward to visiting someday, but for right now, this will have to do. You guys have visited us in Knoxville before, so hopefully we can return the favor as we increase this partnership down the road.
Well, I have no doubt that will happen, and we will have many of opportunities for that to take place in the future. But to get us started, if you don't mind, tell our viewers a little bit about the NEDC and what it generally does.
Yeah, at the NEDC, we were formed to care for God's tiniest image bearers. So, to sum it up in probably about 30 seconds, we accept embryos that are remaining from people's IVF. I mean, if you believe life begins at conception, you believe that these are the tiniest human lives. So we will accept those embryos that are remaining that people aren't going to use to build their family. And we will take them, we will store them at our lab here in Knoxville, free of charge to the couples who were involved in their development. And then we adopt those embryos out to people who want to either build or add to their family. So it's a way of adoption that a lot of people don't know about. Every time I talk about it, somebody is hearing about embryo adoption for the first time. And it is blessed, life-affirming work.
Amen to that. And yes, it is. And I have to admit, even through my 3.5 years of infertility and looking at all the options, I never came across embryo adoption. And so I think a lot of our viewers in our community this will be their first time hearing about it. So that's why we're so excited to be able to bring you in and really give them this knowledge that they can use and pray over. And so I guess let's start first with the donation process. How does it work for couples when they find themselves having frozen embryos, but not wanting to discard them?
Well, the first thing that they would want to do is go to our website, embryodonation.org, and we've made both tracks pretty easy to start. You just start on our website. There are panels at the bottom of a couple of pages, the home page being one, or if you wanted to donate, the donation FAQs page. You find both of those just by going to the navigation tab. So yeah, you scroll down to the bottom and you'll see, excuse me, you'll see a panel that says apply to donate. You just hit get started, fill out the various screen prompts, which really doesn't take very long. And that is what gets your journey started with the NEDC from the donation standpoint. Now, after that, within a couple of days, usually somebody from our organization will get in touch with you. They'll have more forms and consents for you to fill out. Like anything, there's some paperwork, there's some bureaucracy involved in the process. It's not too bad, but it's there. And generally, the process is going to take 6 to 9 months from that day you go to your computer and start it. So it'll be 6 to 9 months till we've procured the embryos. We have them on site in our lab. So, to a lot of people, that's not a fast process, but it is a good process. And, the reason that it takes so long, people ask a lot of times is just because we have so many people who want to do it. So that's a blessing that we have so many couples who have embryos remaining from IVF that they want to give a chance at life rather than just destroy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you mentioned this in the introduction, but is there any cost throughout the entire process where the donating family has any cost associated with it?
No, there should not be. They will have to do an FDA required blood draw. That's a pretty simple finger prick, I think, in most cases, to screen for STDs. And that is something that should not be a big deal. We will provide them with the lab recs so they can go to a lab in their area and get those done. We will also cover the cost of that. And no, they won't have to pay the shipping fee to get the embryos here. So there is no cost from our perspective to the donor. We want to make it as easy for them to donate and make the life affirming choice as possible. One point that I would make, you will, if you're a donor, still have to pay your fees to whatever fertility clinic has your embryos until we've actually taken possession of them and have them here in Knoxville. It's fairly common that somebody will ask, they'll be, well, gosh, it's going to be whatever, 5 or 6 months until my embryos actually get there in Knoxville. I'm going to have to pay however many $100 in storage. But until then, will you guys cover that for me? No, we don't cover that for you. I mean, that is your responsibility. But the good news is that those fees that in many cases people have been paying for years end as soon as we have those embryos on site here in Knoxville.
So with the transfer process, do you guys handle that? I know I've walked through it with a friend, and that was a bit of a struggle as far as the communication between the two fertility specialists when trying to transfer embryos. So do you guys make that direct contact and organize that transfer?
We do. Yep, we do. We make it as easy on the donors as possible. And once they have given us their fertility clinic's information, right, our team just takes it from there. And that's our whole goal, is to make this process as easy on the donors as possible. And we've done it so often now that it usually goes pretty smoothly. Now, occasionally it doesn't. We're dealing with human beings. You have to make allowances for human frailty always. And sometimes a lab will be a little more reticent or just not on it when it comes to responding to us.
Right.
And in that case, it will be a little bit more on the donor. I mean, we'll work hard. We'll reach out several times, and we always do. Sometimes the donor may have to personally get involved themselves, but those cases are relatively rare. It is good to know that it could happen, just to have it in the back of your mind.
Absolutely. Takes both parties to respond.
Yes.
So true.
And I will applaud the NEDC for that, as a couple, Mary Lee and I, who have gone through this from the adoption side, not necessarily the donating side. I mean, when you've got the paperwork done and you're ready to get those embryos in and do that transfer, like you're just eager to get those embryos from one site to the other, or make sure that they're there. And I can speak from experience that the NEDC does that efficiently. And Krista and the staff there are just amazing at keeping us in the loop of when we can expect them and when we can expect a transfer. And the same with y'all's website, which you touched on. It's, for any couple out there who's watching this and considering this, and you're probably overwhelmed because it's new to you, check out the website. It is sectioned off between donating families, adopting families, and the frequently asked questions pages are just so informative. So I applaud you all for trying to take some of the stress out of that for the couples. You do make it as easy as possible.
Well, thank you, Rodney. And we, and I will tell you that, just our hope is that in the next 2, 3, 4 months, we're going to expand our services to donors on our website, not in the sense that we're going to do more than take their embryos, accept their embryos. Yes, we're going to do that, but we do want it to be more of a repository for guidance to donors about what to expect, about some of the emotional parts of the process. As we've surveyed the landscape, we've realized that there's sort of a lack there. And as the leading embryo donation and adoption organization, that's something that our leadership wants to correct. So I think you can expect very soon on the NEDC website even a little bit more pinpointed guidance for donors, along with more emotional support being offered, because it's an emotional decision.
Yes,
That's
without
great.
doubt. Well, while you're talking about the donors, as I noted, mine and Mary Leah's experience is limited to the adopting side, and we're not as familiar with the donation side. So I know one of the questions we're going to have for people who have embryos and may be considering the NEDC is, what kind of say or control, if any, does a donating family have in deciding which family adopts their embryos?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rodney. They can have as little or as much as they want. So with the NEDC, you can go one of two routes when you donate your embryos. You can go open, which means you will have some sort of limited relationship with the adopting family, or you can go closed, which means you will have no relationship, at least not facilitated by us or people that we're in touch with the adopting family. The people who go closed usually just look at doing embryo donation as a matter of closure. It's already a hard emotional decision for them to give up these embryos, this life that they have had a hand in bringing about, and knowing that their genetics are going to be out there in somebody else's family. That's hard. That's harder for some people to accept than it is others. So the people who go closed often just look at it as closure. They want to know they did the life affirming thing, but they don't necessarily want a relationship. Whereas the people who go open do obviously want a relationship. Now, how close that relationship is, how often they're getting together with the adopted family, whether they're getting together with the adopted family. That does happen in some cases where the adoptive family and the donating family will get together and take vacations or things like that. It becomes like an aunt, uncle, cousin sort of relationship. Some people want that. Others, for others, an open relationship just looks like a letter or an exchange of pictures a couple times a year, or just being connected with one another on social media. That's worked out in a piece on a piece of paper called an open donation agreement that you being a lawyer, Rodney, I'm sure you'd be great at this if you chose to do this sort of work. But so basically the donating family and the adopting family go back and forth separately over the phone with a social worker who serves as a mediator. Usually takes 4 to 6 weeks. So it does add a little bit of time to the embryo adoption process on the adoption end. But at the end of that 4 to 6 weeks, they have a plan, and that's what they're supposed to stick to. And if there are questions or things that come up along the way, the social worker has contracted to help mediate that relationship. So, and you asked, do I have control if I'm a donor over who my embryos? Yes, you can put specific parameters on your embryos. You can say, well, I'd rather they not go to the southeast part of the country if that's where you live. I mean, that's just an example of a parameter somebody may put on it. And like when an adopted couple is brought to you as a potential match, you will get their information in a non-identifying way. So you'll know about them, their values, where they live, their situation, their circumstances, their family composition. And if you, as the donor, feel like this is not the home that you want those embryos to go to, you do have the right to say, no, I don't think this is the match for us.
Okay. That's very good to hear, that the different, I guess, as far as the open and semi-open and closed, that it sounds a lot like what you may experience in a traditional adoption, and that's really, up to the couples to come together and kind of match themselves or pair themselves in those areas.
It is.
Well, you just noted that I was an attorney. So as an attorney, I do have to ask you this. Do donating families have any responsibility or parental rights of their embryos which end up being adopted?
No, they have entrusted them to our care. So once we have them, as you know, Rodney, I mean, we don't fully agree with this, obviously, but embryos in the United States are considered to be property legally. So really what you have when we take custody of the embryos at the NEDC, it's a property transfer. So those embryos are in our care and custody. Any responsibility of the donating family ends at that point. It certainly ends when the embryos are transferred to the womb of the adopting family. So no, there is no sort of legal responsibility once we have taken custody, and once the adopted family has taken custody, the embryo donor's responsibility to those embryos has been met.
Yeah, I was surprised to experience that part of it in our journey. I do hope that the law catches up with the science one day and recognizes the embryos as we see them. But it was surprising that, during this contracting phase, they're really treated no differently than, a transfer of a car or a couch. But that, while that made the process efficient, I do look forward to the law changing and catching up one day and recognizing the importance of this, transaction.
I think that would be welcome. You can go down a legal rabbit trail here. We all agree, all of us in this conversation, probably most of the people listening to us, agree that these are human lives. These are the tiniest human beings. Giving them the legal status of personhood could be troubling. for liability reasons
Yeah.
to fertility clinics, and you can probably see that, Rodney. So that's where this gets a little dicey. We don't need to get into that, but I want to echo your point. These embryos aren't property, and whatever the legal remedy is, these are people. These are God's tiniest image bearers, and that's why we're all involved in this work.
Amen.
Yes. So we know that there's couples who have gone through the IVF transfer process and have been successful the first time or second time, and they have embryos left over, or they've come across after their pregnancy and have been deemed high risk, where they aren't recommended to be, go through the pregnancy again. And so they have extra embryos left over. Are there other scenarios that we're overlooking that might fall into this embryo donation?
There may be a few, Mallory. That's a good question, and those are the main ones. The main ones I think you have laid out. It's people who are just done building their families. They sort of came into this with tunnel vision, usually not thinking a whole lot about what they would do if they have embryos remaining, because they want so badly and understandably to have a child. So that's where their focus is. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the situation in which most people find themselves. Yes, you could occasionally have somebody who has a high risk pregnancy. She has multiples, which are always higher risk pregnancies, and the OB counsels her not to, it probably would be wise to not have another pregnancy and so in that case, right, they were planning to use all of their embryos, and circumstances came up that made it probably not the wisest decision. Occasionally there may be another type of situation where maybe somebody has what we would consider a special consideration embryos. They've been found to have markers for Down syndrome or autism or any number really of conditions, and they just think for whatever reason, maybe the children they already had have those conditions, and it's just a lot. They're at their load bearing capacity, and they don't think they could bring another child with requiring extra care and attention into that home. But there may be somebody who goes through the NEDC who would want to welcome those special consideration embryos into their home. We do have people who come specifically looking for those harder to place embryos. So if anybody's listening who's in that situation, I have good news for you. There's a good life affirming place for those embryos, and there are people who have a heart for them.
That's awesome.
Those would be the main situations, I would say.
Okay, great.
Well, before we move on to the embryo adoption side, is there anything else from the donating side that we have failed to cover that you would like to share with the viewers?
I think you have done a great job of unpacking the embryo donation side of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything you haven't covered. I think it was pretty comprehensive.
Well, if not, we'll give you an opportunity at the end if something comes to mind.
Yeah.
But moving on to the embryo adoption side, which is the side that I am more familiar with, can you explain to our viewers who may be considering embryo adoption the process they can expect to experience when adopting through the NEDC?
Right. So it would be very similar to the donation path, except it's just the adoption path. So you're going to go to embryodonation.org, and when you first come to that navigation menu, you are going to want to look for the adoption FAQs page. We have a list of about 20 questions and answers on that page that unpack the program pretty well. And if you're able to read through that, might take you 20-25 minutes if you were reading it really carefully, which you should. Then you can scroll down to the bottom of the page. You'll see a panel that says apply for adoption. You hit get started. You follow the various prompts. Most people will pay a $400 application fee via credit card at that time. And as long as you get a receipt for that payment in your email, you'll know you're good. Your submission went through okay. And then the next the next contact you'll have from us, at least this is how we do it right now, is you'll get an email from Krista, who you've worked with, Rodney, our patient coordinator. Within 7 days, you'll get an email from her with a packet of forms and consents for you and your spouse to fill out and get back to us. And then you're on your way. Then the rest of the journey takes shape from there.
And I know earlier you mentioned from the donating side, that's usually, I think you said, a 6 to 9 month process. But from the adoption side, about how long does it take from when they make that first contact or make that first payment, as you just mentioned?
Usually you should expect 8 to 9 months. That's where we are right now. And a lot of times people will ask, well, why is it so long? They think it seems like a long amount of time, and I understand that. Nobody likes to wait, but the reason is really, it really has to do with demand. We are seeing more, and we're thankful for this, more people who want to adopt embryos, which is great. And we're still a relatively small nonprofit. I mean, we don't have endless resources. We're not in like a 4-story building with every floor filled. That's not us. Sometimes people think that is, where we are, and that's not. I mean, we have a pretty small staff doing a lot of work and getting people in, getting them through the process as fast as they can. And there is no wait list. It's just that you come into the process where you come into the process. There's no cutting in line. It's a first come, first serve thing. So if you come into the stream in April, somebody who came into the stream a few weeks earlier in February will just naturally be ahead of you. That's just the way it works. Now we do all we can to streamline and speed up the process. We're doing a lot more transfers now than we did just a couple of years ago. We're doing them more frequently. We have been able to expand our staff, but yeah, that's the main reason that it takes 8 to 9 months.
And like you said, a good problem to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned at the beginning, there's like a 25 question answer thing that kind of helps them walk through this process. Is there other resources that they have to kind of help them decide if this is the right path for them?
Yeah, Mallory, it's a good question. There certainly are. And honestly, I tell people, just give us a call. I mean, one of the things that we're here for is to answer those questions from prospective embryo adopters who who have looked at the website and they think maybe this is the direction for them, but there are some questions on there that are specific and that weren't answered. So they can call us. The number is right on the website, and we're happy to answer those questions. There are plenty of other good resources, but besides our website, I think the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center, which people can just Google online, but it's run by our friends at Snowflakes, which is a division of Nightlight Christian Adoptions, and those are good folks over there. We generally don't comment on or refer to or recommend other organizations, but I think we can safely say we know the folks at Snowflakes quite well. We have a friendly relationship with them, and there's a lot of good stuff from their website, embryoadoption.org. That'll give you a lot of good information about embryo adoption. If you want to know more about it, at one point, the federal government gave grants to raise awareness about embryo adoption. They still do. We have not had any federal funding for about 7 years, and we don't feel like we need it. But you can always go to the hhs.gov website and Google embryo adoption too, if you're interested in the funding history. But I really do. I think those are the main places. I recommend people to follow the NEDC on social media. We're just look up the National Embryo Donation Center. We're at Embryo Donation is our handle on Facebook. We're NEDC Knox TN on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube, and we have our own podcast, the Embryo Adoption Podcast. That's the name of it. And we have tried to basically talk to anybody in any kind of situation and unpack this from every angle we can. We're still doing it, but a lot of people have listened to the Embryo Adoption Podcast and told us they found it helpful. So those are a few resources.
That's great. Now that's a lot. And so I think they can get all, at least all they need. And then I think what's amazing is that you guys are still willing to pick up the phone and just have that one-on-one conversation, which sometimes that's what a couple needs, is kind of that personal affirmation. So we appreciate you guys doing that as well. As far as the adopting family, do they receive medical history on those embryos? Is that part of what the donor has to submit?
Yes. It's a good question. I'm glad you asked about that. People do wonder, am I going to get the medical history? And you will. You'll get the full genetic and health history when you're going through our online donor database. Once you get to the point of the matching process, which is several months down the road. There are a couple key milestones you have to clear with the NEDC before we can open up our donor database to you. So yes, you'll get full genetic and health history. You'll receive information on like demographic information, like ethnicity, on the people who are involved in the development of the embryos. As long as it's available, even things like height, weight, hair color, eye color, education level, vocation, pictures. You'll see those if they're available. And we don't want to get so far down this road that it gets creepy and that it gets that you get into like designer babies. So we you need to have a line. Everybody draws a line, and we do draw those lines. So I think we try to walk that balance as well as we can in terms of giving you the best information so you can be fully informed on the embryos that you're going to adopt without creating this just absurd notion that the perfect kid is out there.
Right.
They're not. You're gonna have a fallen human being who may or may not be like you, and may or may not be like the people who were involved in the development of the embryos at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you talk about the matching, there kind of explain a little bit. I know there was criteria that the donor could put, as far as you gave the example of regional or whatnot, faith-based, whatever. And then the adopting family also has those criteria, I guess, correct? And then do they both come into agreement? And just talk to me. I'm trying to.
That's right. No, you said it just right.
I don't have the answer.
No, they did. If they're going open, if they're going open, right, they would both have to come into agreement and reach a meeting of the minds that it's a match. Okay. And that happens in the open donation agreement process. And sometimes open donation agreements, or ODAs for short, do fail. Sometimes the two couples can't reach a mutual level of accountability. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, usually they're able to, but it's something that people, if you're going open, should know about. You should know that the possibility exists that there will be a hitch in there that you didn't necessarily foresee when you started trying to work out the ODA. So I think it's just something that's good to be prepared for. You obviously get to know people better when you start going through that process, and maybe some things that weren't manifest when you started get revealed.
And I think
nothing too dramatic, by the way. That sounded a lot more dramatic.
It sounds like you probably have some stories there.
Oh, well, yeah, but I also don't want to convey that happens very often, or that there are a lot of disasters. Yeah, there's always the potential that it can end in disappointment, but it means you just go back and you choose another donor. And and if you go closed, you don't have to work out an ODA. you're going to have so much criteria that you're going to see in choosing that embryo that, yes, you really are sort of selecting your own parameters on whether you go open or closed. But closed, you just don't have to deal with the ODA.
Okay. And that's a good, a good point to make, which is even when you get that far into it, it's not like it has to happen. If there's things that you don't agree with, then there's a way to kind of stop that particular adoption, but you're not having to start completely over either, right? In the process, they're able to get back.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Mallory. You're not locked in. You're not locked in. If something emerges during the process of trying to work out an ODA where you're like, I just don't think it's going to happen with this donating couple, you can go to another couple that can be your new first intended set of embryos, and right, you're not going to pay an additional fee for going to that next set and trying to work out an open donation agreement. So it's not total disaster. I mean, it may be a little bit disappointing,
sure,
but it's not an insurmountable challenge.
And it's not an ending, right?
It's not an ending.
So you talked about closed and you talked about open. Is there in the middle, semi-open or semi-closed? I don't know which way it'd go. Or is it
Not
just
with
open
us.
or closed?
It's just open or closed.
Okay.
There are, the open relationships look different. The levels of contact look different, but with us, there is no semi-open. You're either open or closed.
The ODA is where you decide how open you want to be. You're either going on vacations or you're writing a letter or somewhere in between. You got it. You got it. I'm learning. I see what's happening.
The confusion there at the semi-open, which is how Mary Leah and I refer to ours, because we have some friends who have done this and they are open. They're direct communication, they're Facebook friends, they're exchanging information all the time. And ours is, we do have direct contact, but it's a little more, limited than what we know of our other friends. And so that's where the semi-open language that Mallory picked up on with me is we did go through that process, and we did spend some time with that other couple in the back and forth over, what was this going to look like? What kind of communication? Like, do you all just want a photo every year on their birthday, or how is that going to work? And I really appreciate the process that everybody or the role everybody plays in that process. And I guess to alleviate any concerns from the disaster scenario you were talking about, I can tell people from my experience, the matching process was one of the more exciting things or exciting parts of all this. I mean, we were not looking for a designer baby by any stretch of the means, but finding that couple and their family and their interest, and looking at the nature versus nurture of all of it, like it was extremely exciting.
I think you summed it up exactly right. The difference between finding a good match that fits and promoting designer babies. I think you just hit it perfectly there, Rodney. That's exactly right.
Let's see where we. I was sitting here trying to look at. I think we jumped ahead in some of our notes here.
Got wrapped up in the conversation. I really was like learning so much. Okay, one other question about this, and then I'll pass it over to Rodney. With the traditional adoptions require that home study. And I guess what we've been talking about through kind of the documentation that they do with you guys, is that similar with the embryo adoption and what you guys require?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If they're going through the NEDC, they need to have either a home study, just a normal, typical infant adoption home study done by an agency that's accredited to do those in the state in which they live. So that'll work. Or you can do what's called a Snowflake's family evaluation, SFE for short, and that is sort of an alternative home study that is only for embryo adoption, and that is provided by our friends at Snowflake's as well. So, and an SFE, we present it as an option because it can be better for some people. It is not as flexible as a typical adoption home study. It's not good for both embryo adoption and a typical domestic adoption, but there can be some advantages. The snowflakes people will go anywhere in the country. Sometimes they can be faster than another sort of home study. Sometimes they can be cost effective. Their home studies, their SFEs, I believe, are valid for 2 years, which a lot of times home studies are only valid for 1. So, we don't recommend one over the other. It's up to the people. But yeah, they're going to have to clear some sort of home study and background evaluation. Criminal background checks are going to be a part of any home study evaluation. They're going to have to be prepared to open up their life, talk about their life story, finances, proof from your tax filings of income, usually testimony from people who are close friends or relative references. So yeah, they're gonna have to be prepared for all that, and that's that's one reason that at the NEDC, not all embryo adoption programs do that, but at the NEDC, that's one reason people like going with us from the donor perspective, is because they like having that peace of mind that these homes, the people have been screened. They want to make sure that they're doing right by their embryos. So we do all, that's why we require that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Awesome.
Well, one of the big questions that I know Mary Leah and I had initially was, how do we tell this child his or her unique story? And so with that in mind, does the NEDC have resources it recommends for families who have children as a result of embryo adoption, and now they're trying to figure out, like, how do we share their adoption story with them?
Yeah, and there is there are a few children's books on our website. That is one of the sections that you'll also find on the navigation menu. And one that I really recommend that is called Chosen and Loved. And it was written by Sherry Kazmierczak, who is one of our embryo adoption moms, and it's well illustrated as well. And it's one of those books that you can personalize, so you can make it the child's own story and make it age specific. So again, that's Chosen and Loved. You can find it, find out more about it, even purchase it from the NEDC website or their website. I believe it's just chosenandloved.org. But the Kazmierczaks have provided a great resource there. There are other age appropriate books where you can start introducing the concept. We have a couple by Whitney Williams on our website. She's an embryo adoption mom who did not go through the NEDC, but she's still a friend of ours, and she's written some good resources for younger kids on that. So they're out there. Otherwise you can probably just Google books on embryo adoption. So there are a few. There's a book called The Pea That Was Me, which has come highly recommended. So we like that one. There's one called Training Wheels that we helped produce a few years ago, probably about a decade ago now. You can find those on Amazon. So yeah, resources are out there. Those are just a few of the ones we'd recommend.
Okay. Well, we touched on this a little bit earlier, and how the law really hasn't or caught up with embryo adoption and how it treats this transaction, I guess you could say. But for our viewers out there who are probably familiar with the traditional adoption process, can you confirm that currently, whether there are any requirements for a family that's doing embryo adoption to go to a court and have a judge to finalize, their adoption?
To my knowledge, there is no requirement. There's no place where that is a requirement. One thing with embryo adoption, you never have to worry about the family of origin, if you will, taking the child back, which happens sometimes in an adoption arrangement, a typical adoption arrangement, a domestic adoption arrangement. That's not a typical scenario, but it does happen. With embryo adoption, that doesn't happen. The parents will be the parents. If you have done embryo adoption, you and your spouse will be that child's biological parents listed on the birth certificate. Now, there are a couple of states where, if it makes you feel better about it, you can go and have that child legally declared adopted. I know Georgia is one of them. I can't remember the other one, so I don't want to say it. I could take a guess, but in case I'm wrong, that's not necessary. But I think in those states, they've made some legal allowances just to make, if it's important to people, then those states have determined that's best. But to my knowledge, it's not necessary anywhere.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you here to alleviate any concerns that an adopting family may have on that front. Because I know when we first started this, we do hear of stories where with traditional adoption that sometimes the placing parents change their minds or have second thoughts. And so that was something Mary Lee and I were concerned with, like, can the genetic parents later change their minds? But everything we looked at and all the information we've received from you all, we've received assurances that that's not anything we need to be concerned with. And we're, I guess, relieved to hear that even on the birth certificate, like, we're identified as the parents.
Well, yeah, and it does make sense. I mean, that is your biological child. She's gestated the child and provided the prenatal environment. So that's accurate, even if the genetics aren't yours. I mean, that's your child, and you've provided a really important part of his or her upbringing while they were in the womb. So yeah, we can totally allay those fears. There's no placing family, taking the child back, or anything like that.
Well, Blessed Brokenness knows this oh so well, which is the financial burden that fertility treatments have on couples. And we try to ease those burdens through financial assistance. What is the cost for the adopting family? And is there financial assistance through the NEDC or other organizations that might support this cause?
Yeah, so generally a first embryo transfer with the NEDC total cost is going to be somewhere around $10,500 to $12,000 probably. That's not just what you pay to us. That should include all the fees: home study, medication, open donation agreement if you're going to go that route. So yeah, that's all the fees really, except for like travel and lodging if you come to Knoxville for a transfer. Yes, the NEDC does have a family building grant program where we try to save couples money, usually on the donor fees. And I don't want to get too technical, but those are fees that couples will pay on the day they have their frozen embryo transfer. They are reimbursing us for the cost of shipping and caring for those embryos, and sometimes those can be significant. So when we can, we are a 501c3, so we do have people who give us charitable donations, and we try to give a generous amount of that money away. In years past, it's been close to half the charitable donations that we've received we've given back through the family building grant fund. So yes, there is help there. There are many other opportunities out there for financial help with embryo adoption. Our friends at Parental Hope have a very good scholarship program where they've been able to help several of our NEDC families. So parentalhope.org is certainly a program that I would direct people towards. There are a bunch. The Cade Foundation would be another one. They will help with embryo adoption. There are organizations that even provide loans. A group called American Christian helps provide loans in some cases for embryo adoption. So there are a lot, and they can call us if they want like a complete list. Sure. I don't want to get, we're going to get boring if I go through all of them, but those are a few.
Well, it's good to know there's abundance of financial assistance that they can explore. And just to clarify, the $10,000 to $12,000 is from submitting that application to going through the adoption process, home study, and then for the actual transfer of the embryo. And so at what point does kind of the medical care, you guys, how long do you keep the family until they then go back to their OB at home? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually we like to be with them through about the 9 or 10 week ultrasound. And if everything looks good, then our medical specialists will release them to the care of their OB exclusively. So yeah, you're generally looking at the 9 to 10 week mark after the frozen embryo transfer has occurred.
Okay, and you guys they would come to Knoxville. There's not other facilities that you guys utilize. It's just Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, you make 2 trips to Knoxville. Your initial appointment, you'll meet your entire care team, which Rodney described a little bit of that visit earlier. The woman will go through a trial embryo transfer and a saline infused sonogram to receive medical clearance. That's one of the milestones that you have to clear before you can be approved for matching. The other is just that your home study is completed and reviewed. So there's that. And then of course you come back to Knoxville for your frozen embryo transfer.
Okay. And then do you guys see them again for that ultrasound prior to, or is that?
We can, if they're close, but usually what they'll do is they'll establish what's called an outside monitoring relationship with the fertility clinic back home where they are, since most people who adopt through the NEDC are not from, they're not from the Knoxville area. They're not even from Tennessee. Most people come from all over the world. So usually what they'll do is they'll establish an outside monitoring relationship, and with a clinic there, that clinic is in touch with us about the results, and then we're in touch with the families about those results.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's very manageable. And Knoxville's a great place. I love
It is. It is not. Knoxville is a terrific time. I've lived here about seven years now, and that's a great thing. We're just right at the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, so it is a beautiful place to visit, and a lot of our families do make little vacations and mini vacations out of it.
It is a great place. Well, good. Rodney, you got any other questions you want to hit?
Well, I do. As we're winding down, I'm gonna take the exciting question that we wanted to pitch to you, which was, can you tell us how many babies have been born through embryo adoption in the NEDC?
Well, as of this recording, we are at 1,184. So that's a lot of embryo adoption births, almost 1,200 babies. And, that's the most of any embryo adoption group in the world. And we don't say that to toot our own horn. It's just that, what we believe is that God has chosen to bless this ministry, and we built the ministry around the sanctity and protecting the sanctity and dignity of the human embryo. We love that we're able to help the adults involved. We love that we're able to help the people on the donation side resolve a moral dilemma of what to do with their embryos. We love that we're able to help the people on the adoption side either build or add to their families and welcome these young lives into their homes. But it's really the embryos that we were formed for, and that drives everything that we do. So God has just chosen to honor that. And man, we're just it's like we sort of pinch ourselves sometimes. That's a lot. So we're grateful.
Well, I love how you started that answer with, as of the time of this recording, because I remember seeing on social media not too long ago where you all were celebrating your 1,000 babies. And not too long after that, Mary Lee and I were up there, and you even gave us coffee mugs celebrating that, which is a great thing to celebrate. But even then, I was like, this is a little outdated. You've already breached 1,100 by the time, and it only been a month or so later, but very exciting. And we're so happy for you all. And so for our viewers, for those out there who have embryos remaining, whatever those circumstances are, please consider donating them to the NEDC, especially, as opposed to discarding them. And for those who have done IUI or IVF and have not had the success you were hoping for yet, please consider embryo adoption. They have plenty of them up there in Knoxville that are available, and in a great process. And to the extent neither one of those avenues speaks to you, consider donating to them, in addition to Blessed Brokenness, but nonetheless to the NEDC. As Mark noted, they are a 501c3, and they do take donations and operate on support to alleviate some of those costs. And and help things to move a little more efficiently. So, anything you can do to help out, I'm sure Mark would appreciate receiving.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Rodney. It's embryodonation.org if you want to find out any more information. And you're right. I mean, we call Knoxville the embryo adoption capital of the world because, we're the only, to our knowledge, we're the only embryo adoption program with this model where we have the embryos here. So it's like Knoxville is where the embryos are. And we can pretty much guarantee, we can guarantee you when you come to Knoxville, you're going to have a transfer. Even if your first intended set of embryos does not survive the thaw, you have because we have so many here on site, you have the ability to choose backup embryos. So we've never had anybody come to Knoxville and not be able to have a transfer. So that's just another advantage of our model, and it just shows how the Lord has blessed us when they hung out the shingle almost 20 years ago for people to, telling people they could donate their embryos to the NEDC. Well, people obviously responded. So we love it. And yes, I love what you said. Prayerfully consider any of those three options, whichever fits you. But don't give to us instead of your church, and don't give to us instead of Blessed Brokenness. In addition to.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. We appreciate this. This was just so much great information, and I know it will bless our community. And we look forward, I know Rodney and I look forward to partnering with you guys more and continuing this conversation. And for the viewers out there, if you have additional questions, you're always welcome to reach out to us at blessedbrokenness.org or give NEDC a call because they love to talk to you too. All right. Well, thank you for watching the Fertility Talk series by Blessed Brokenness. Everybody have a blessed day.
Thank you for listening to the Fertility Talk series hosted by Blessed Brokenness. To join a small group or apply for fertility scholarship, visit our website at blessedbrokenness.org. We hope you will join us for our next Fertility Talk, available every second Monday of the month.